Using a Photovoice project for engaging students. In spring 2021, with support by the Teacher Preparation Transformation Special Interest Research Groups, a proposal titled Creating a Teacher Candidate Learning Community for Mentoring Latino Freshmen at a Hispanic Serving Institution was accepted, launching a new research project. The freshman to finisher pipeline of teacher candidates warrants close research and study of effective support structures to promote rigorous and high quality experiential and academic preparation of future teachers. Doctors Griselda Garcia, Karen Lewis, Miriam Dulanto Espinosa, and Eunice Lerma, members of the Special Interest Research Group, planned a research project that includes long-term goals of building a mentorship program for teacher candidates as they enter the university at the freshman level by establishing a learning community in an introductory education course and the Learning Frameworks course. To date, members of the Special Interest Research Group successfully completed a university-supported professional development, Conexión, first year Student Success Academy, to develop a course syllabus in a Photovoice project for linking two introductory freshman level courses for building a learning community. Through these activities, continued planning and design of a mentorship model will ensue. We welcome our facilitators today, and we welcome all of you as well.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Griselda Garcia, one of the presenters today. And if we could quickly just unmute so that the others can say hello. Karen Lewis, I'm not sure if you're on the call yet. We have Miriam also here.
I am. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
So good afternoon, everybody. We're very happy to be here and share. As was noted, this is part of a bigger project in that we're researching and hoping to develop a mentorship model for our teacher candidates. And so part of that process was working on this Photovoice project, and we were able to get quite a bit of support from student consultants, the Center for Teaching Excellence through the Conexión Academy. And so part of that is what you're going to be seeing today, and we're going to be sharing with you. It is not a final product. It is formative, but we are more than happy to collect some of your feedback, or some of your questions will help us also in refining the project. So we'd like to share today what we have so far. And as I noted, we're very excited about the opportunity to continue to develop this. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I will talk a little bit about Photovoice in general, just as an overview, but then we'll talk a little bit. Karen will be able to share a little bit more about the rationale behind using Photovoice for developing a teacher philosophy. And then I can talk a little bit more specific to the details of the project that we're hoping to develop and offer to our teacher candidates as freshmen. So you heard mention that we're looking forward to working with students from freshman to finisher. Currently, as you may or may not know, teacher candidates get admitted to our program at junior level. So that's one of the primary reasons that we're thinking about ways to support them in the first 2 years. So if we look at using Photovoice as a process for engaging our students, one of the things that is really important is understanding just the basic foundational knowledge of Photovoice and what it is. And so I just want to share with you, I have been to a workshop with Amanda Latz. She's from Ball State University, and she provided excellent workshop in how to use Photovoice. So it did originate as participatory action research in the mid-90s, primarily in medical health professions. And the primary reason that it became pretty popular was because it was a way to document some aspects of participants as they experienced and it usually targeted like marginalized populations that may not have the advocacy or academic language to express exactly how they were experiencing certain aspects of their lives. For example, if you looked at the homeless population and you were trying to create a policy, for example, how do you express and how do you share out what exactly their experiences are? And so photography became really, really important in capturing not only the emotional, but their lived experience trajectory. And so that was one of the primary reasons that this type of action research became popular. The idea behind it is that it is to create change, whether it's policy, whether any kind of social change. So it gives agency to the participant, and they have a very, very active role in this kind of research. Photovoice as a methodology for research is flexible. The way that we've used it, you're going to see in our project, it is a different way that we're using it as part of our learning community project, but we'll share that a little bit more in a bit. So the basic steps, and I feel like I'm talking too fast, so if you have any questions or you want me to pause on something, feel free to mention that in the chat. The basic steps in Photovoice methodology is basically the first step is identifying the place, purpose, the people that are going to be involved. And so as we describe our project, you'll be able to see that we took these steps as part of a way to develop our Photovoice project for creating a teaching philosophy. The next step will, in the process itself, is to identify who the participants will be. Again, it is purposeful because you want to give voice and agency to possibly a population that may not have that in society and for different reasons. The step 3 is providing instructions to the participants, explaining the process, outlining the parameters of the project, which are very, very important. And then again, more to come as I talk a little bit more about how we applied it. The next step is documentation. How will you be able to document the lived experiences in a visual way? And so that's part of the process. As an instructor, we explain what the assignment is, right? What the parameters are. In some cases, obviously, you're going to use photographs, and how you take those pictures is part of what the documentation is. And so you need to give instruction to that. Sometimes it's appropriate to use disposable cameras, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I know that with cell phones, this is pretty popular. And so Photovoice has been used with cell phones. There are different options. Once you understand what the purpose of the project is, that may better explain what you use to document and what seems appropriate for the purpose of your project. You do provide prompts related to the purpose of the project or research questions if this was the methodology that you were undertaking. And so there is some kind of guidance and reflection questions for the participants. And again, it usually captures a journey or a trajectory, a timeline. And so you would be able to guide that as a process with questions. The next step would be narration, which is the opportunity for the participants to either assign captions to the photographs or to describe. You could have focus group interviews, for example, where they're explaining why they took the picture they took, and they give you context to the photograph. Ideation is the next step, and this is a part of constructing meaning together. And so as a researcher or as the teacher, you're able to identify some of the themes. You're able to pose some questions to the participants so that they can reflect on what it all means together in terms of how to capture an overall theme for what they've presented to you thus far. And then the final, well, not the final, but the next step would be presenting it. So you would have an audience in the presentation of the final project. And this would be an opportunity for the participant to describe the overall themes, overall feelings, or to try to capture in a broad context what it means, what do the different photographs exemplify about their experience. And then the final project is, how did the audience receive the messaging? And so that is an important part to capture. So what is it that the audience members, the policy makers, whomever it was presented to, how did they receive the message, and what are their thoughts? And so that would be included as part of the overall processing of how the project went, for example. So I'm going to stop there. Feel free to unmute if you have any questions, or if you want to include any questions up to now on the chat, we'll be more than happy to answer those. Is there any questions at this time? We will leave it open at the end as well. So I understand this is maybe difficult to see because it is small, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this mode here, and hopefully you can see it a little bit better. So what I want to do is just show you the overall journey of what the project looks like. And then after I do this, then Carol will talk to you a little bit more about the rationale as to why we used it for the courses. And then I'll go back to the details of the project. So this is just kind of high-level overview of what the project is. We received some really good feedback from our student consultants, so it didn't look like this originally. They really like something that would supplement the syllabus to explain those big projects in our courses, the ones that weigh quite a bit and that they're graded on, that carry a lot of weight in the overall grading. And so it's created to supplement your syllabus, but it's also intended to reinforce what you have in your syllabus and provide some additional detail, but in a very, very student-friendly way. So because Photovoice is a journey, we decided to represent it in this way. And so it's like a pathway that includes where the reflective journey begins. So at the beginning of the semester, as you get to know your students, you describe the overall project. You notice here, these are the content topics that are related to the course objectives. And so this course happens to be an introduction to becoming a teacher, the introductory course, a prereq. And so before, diving into a lot of the content from the course, what you want to do is you want to capture what the students think and what their conceptions are about the profession early on. And so it would be really important for students, a lot of them come into the class and they feel like they know exactly what a teacher does. And so at that point, why do you want to become a teacher? And giving them prompts about photographs to take that represent why they want to be teachers is really important as part of this project, because it is before the exposure and, if you will, the disruption of that journey, which is what we're hoping to do as instructors for that course. So they may have preconceived ideas about what teaching is, and then we get into the critical conversations and content. And we really want to teach the content in a critical way, where they're questioning the status quo, where they're questioning what it is that our education system is set up for, and what kind of conceptions they had before they actually get to deal with the content in that way. So students along the way are capturing some photographs with specific prompts, And the whole idea, as I mentioned, is that we're disrupting kind of that path and then spend quite a bit of time at the end of that semester challenging their ideas, their original ideas. And so at this point when they capture photographs, they should look really different from what they originally thought. But what is important to the overall project is that they will be able to then see that journey from beginning to end. And then we can talk about what made the difference, if that indeed happens. Because at the end, the goal would be that they're developing their initial teaching philosophy, because we know that it's going to, they're going to form their philosophy along the way, and it's iterative, right? They're not going to, they're going to be developing that as they learn more and more, or that's at least the goal. Karen, did I miss anything there before I hand it over to you?
No, I think you captured it really well. I think one of the things that you think about when you have a first year student who comes in and thinks they want to be an educator, they think they want to be a teacher. It's usually, you know, their only experience and quite a bit of experience is from the student perspective. And so helping them transition from, yeah, I want to be a teacher because I had a great teacher that inspired me, and as a student, and going from that student identity and that student perspective to an educator identity and developing their own philosophy. I think that's what's so beautiful about this project, is really coaching them along the way and helping them think through all of the different dispositions that are necessary to be an effective educator. And also that learning community aspect of it, because no teacher, even though often a teacher is, you know, the sole teacher in the classroom, but you're not alone. And so I think what's so beautiful about the students getting to see what other people's inspiration for becoming a teacher, reasoning behind it, they start to form a learning community, because they start to see themselves in other people's stories as well. And learning that being a teacher does not mean you're on your own alone, but that there's a whole community of teachers, and being mutually supportive in how you grow and develop into your style and your instructional style and your philosophy for teaching. And there's a lot of aha moments in that introductory course. And the whole idea is these are first year students. They come to us and they already think they want to be a teacher. And rather than wait for 2 years where they get shaped into their major, and then we get them, and then they have to go, oh yeah, and now I've been conceptualizing myself as one thing, and now I have to think of myself as a teacher too, to start having them do that from the very beginning and be much more intentional about their own learning and throughout the process. And so from, like you said, first to finish, I think that will go a long way in cultivating really passionate and invested future teachers.
So, Karen, you may want to add more, because I believe this is the part that when we were working with a project, this was Karen's idea. So one of the things we talked about is why it makes so much sense to have the UNIV and the EDUC, the Introduction to Teaching, as a learning community. And if you look at what UNIV, which is the Learning Frameworks course, is about, the objectives are about student, right? Success in terms of reflecting as a student, understanding the kinds of study strategies that would be effective, and so forth. And so one of the things that we understand is that teachers become the kind of students that they were, obviously with a lot of emphasis on the study strategies that they benefit from. In other words, those become their dominant pedagogical strategies and approaches, because they themselves see themselves as a learner who benefits, for example, from, let's say, mind mapping or webs, or different kinds of strategies. And they say, okay, this is what I'll introduce as part of my teaching strategy repertoire, because they benefited from that as a student. So as teacher educators, we're challenged with that, because we want students to introduce different types, obviously, of learning strategies because of the learning preferences, the learning styles of students. And so that's one of the things that we thought about. We said, as they journey through in reflecting as a student, then we apply that as part of what they need to understand as a teacher, but also take themselves out of that comfort zone where I've never used Cornell Notes. I don't think I can benefit from it. Well, maybe some of your students may. So we need to challenge you to think about and understand at least how to introduce that and why it would be an effective strategy for reading and capturing lecture notes, for example. So I know I said a lot, Karen, and I was hoping you could chime
No,
in.
no, and hearing that from their colleagues, from the other students in the class, to be looking through the student lens and then shifting and looking through the teaching lens and hearing how other people learn best or strategies they use that can open up those possibilities, so they can envision a broader, much more rich repertoire of strategies, and hearing from their fellow students, not just from us telling them, but having them experience it and sharing, can have a much more meaningful experience for them. So yes, exactly. Like, just because I tend to think visually and learn visually and have to present things in a visual form, that's my go-to, doesn't mean that I can't learn through auditory methods or kinesthetic methods, and that trying those out and hearing how other people apply different strategies and approaches, then taking it to the next step and saying, so how can I, as a teacher, incorporate those various types of instructional strategies that resonate with different students so that everybody benefits. But in a learning community, you can share that and they hear it from their peers. And sometimes it's much more meaningful when they hear it from their peers. It really resonates with them than when they hear it from their instructors. So creating that learning community is part of the rationale of the project.
Okay, so and some of this is you'll see here as well. I think we tried to be explicit in the way we wanted to capture what lens the student was using for the project, whether it was from the student or teacher lens. So what we did was, again, this is work in progress. So part of the steps in Photovoice, as you recall, is making sure that we educate the student, we give them all the information, the parameters, the requirements for the project itself. And so this is what we have developed so far. And again, it would be a project that would be across the two courses, the UNIV and the Introduction to Teaching. But you're going to see it here aligned to the objectives from the 1301 Introduction to Teaching course. So part of what we learned in terms of the professional development that we received with the Academy was really, really helpful. And it helped us to think differently about the way that we presented our assignments to our students and the things that we should be thinking about. So some of those connections you're going to see on this right column, belongingness, engagement, the learning process. So how did it align to a lot of the design components that were taught to us, that we discussed during that professional development academy? We went ahead and included that here for ourselves. So this is not necessarily something that you could make different versions. One is for your planning, and then the other is the one you actually hand out to students. And so now the student would have multiple ways to see what the information is on this really critical assignment. They're going to have it in that journey that I just shared with you as a high level overview of the project, but then they're going to have the details and parameters. Plus, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about it in class as well. And so here are the objectives. This is for the instructor as noted here. So the objectives for the project itself. And so we wanted to really think about how the course objective fit with the project as a major assignment. And we also mentioned here a little bit about what the objectives could be for the Learning Framework course as well. And so even the descriptors give you a general sense of how it seems pretty logical in the way that we could create a project that is shared across both courses. So the basic goal, of course, is noted as wanting them to embark on critical reflection as a journey. And we want very specifically to kind of disrupt that intersection between student and professional identity. We know that they're just now forming that, and it's a process in itself. So the student will then just really be launching the initial iteration of what their professional teaching philosophy looks like. So the questions that are posed are here, and that is basically what we would want for students to use as part of what they're going to be, what is it that they're going to be taking pictures of early on, right? And so we want them first to focus on who they are as a student. And again, some of that information was already brought on, but we want to make sure that the students have some opportunity to reflect on what their own schooling experience has been. And that definitely will be an extremely important part of who they become as a teacher. As recommended by our student consultants and what we've learned, we did want to make a Spanish version of the course syllabi, of the project itself, and have it available for students. And again, that's part of just having a kind of the equity lens and being inclusive, and some of the design components that we really had to think about. And so we were challenged in ourselves in thinking about how to outline the project. So the description, I'm just going to take you to one important part of what the assignment is, and that is deciding which photographs the student would have to take. So these are the actual instructions for the student themselves. And so the first part is what your version is. This is the part you would give to your students, because the project is weighted heavily in the course, and we just put 45. It doesn't have to be 45% of the grade, but we want to make sure to spend a lot of time reinforcing what the project is. And so the description, then the audience is obviously the student for this. We want some guiding questions for them on the right here, and we outline the steps for them. The first step is to take photographs. The students are to take 10 photographs of objects, artifacts, scenery, or moments to represent their schooling experience, who you are as a learner. Notice that it doesn't say to take photographs of people. So that is something you have to be very cautious of. Obviously, we don't have consent to take photographs of people, but what is consistent with Photovoice is that the artifacts and objects themselves probably have a greater type of reinforcement of what their experience and emotion is instead of people. So that challenges students to think differently and say, what is it that I could capture in a photograph that would exemplify what my experience as a student was? And I'm going to share just one brief example of what I'm talking about here. So in a project, there was students with disabilities that were asked to engage in a similar process. And the student took a picture of his assignment that had highlighted questions. So the student was only going to complete the highlighted questions on the overall assignment. And that was considered the modifications that the student needed to meet the course objective. But the student felt like, in other words, the message that the student was trying to communicate was just do the odd number, let's say math problems. And that was the modification in itself. So condensing the assignment. And was that really fulfilling the assignment was the question that came about in the discussion with that. So the idea is that the student is putting themselves obviously in their experience with what they've had as a schooling experience, and they capture photographs, 10 photographs of what would represent that. From the 10, the student has to select 6. So this is part of the assignment that you would communicate to the student. The reason that the student would have to select 6 is because they have to have a rationale for excluding some of those photographs. In other words, the ones that make the cut is they probably have more of an emotional tie to the student, and they have a stronger basis. So that is a part of this process, that you would ask students to limit the number of pictures that they're going to be representing their experience or answering a specific question. They should, part of our instruction would be that we would have them capture in a caption, a brief caption, why they chose that picture and how it represents them as a student or their schooling experience. How does it reflect their schooling experience? So early in the journey, they would be able to display what they have so far. And this is, again, part of the beginning of the journey. So they would be able to display what they have so far and the captions for who they were as a student. And then they would present that to the class. I've used Photovoice, and we used Instagram for showing and demonstrating the pictures and presenting them to the peers in class. The only thing that I would, that would be cautionary there is that the student can obviously take a whole lot of pictures, which they're really used to, right? And then making sure that they're very intentional about what they use, that when you have disposable cameras, you're more likely to have them engage in that process in an authentic way, because you only have 15 pictures, for example. And then you say, okay, I want you to take 15, but you're only going to use 7. So they know that they have to use 7 because that's all they have. But when they have they have their iPhone, they're taking pictures, they can filter. We don't want them to filter. We want them to be able to capture the moment in a very authentic way. And we want them to be really intentional about the picture that they select to present. So that's just something for you to think about and what you want to use. A question keeps coming up about whether faces can be used in the photograph. You can blur the faces so people can be in the photographs, but if you blur that, or if there's somehow for you to get the consent, that would be something that's optional. But I would avoid that altogether, as I mentioned before, if possible. In the last step here, it is presenting it to the class and then getting the audience feedback. And I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of emotion sometimes as an audience member from the peers in listening to the presentation of the students. And so that's really important, but it's another part of offering the students early in the semester a very safe place to be, because the peers are reflecting on their experiences, on the student's experience, but they're also relating to the student in a different way. And you're also establishing a real learning, a real safe learning community for them. And so that's an important aspect of the project as well. Are there any questions for that part? So as you progress more through content, and as I mentioned, we guide the students in questioning some of what they're reading and start to compare to what their experience has been. And one of the topics that really is something that students they get in our curriculum, right? Obviously, high stakes assessment, the accountability, and what experience that's been, they have a lot to share in that regard from what I have found. So students have felt like at every turn, they're tested. And when they become teachers, again, in order for them to get into our programs, they're tested. So high stakes testing is a real experience for a lot of them. And I find that that's a really important topic. I don't know what your experience has been, Karen, with that, or Miriam, but that seems to be something that they gain a different understanding about accountability, about the requirements, about the cultural capital of the exams themselves is something that I spend time talking to them about. And they start to think and question and think differently about that. I won't spend more time, but this, so after there's more content processed in the course, then we have the assignment again. So we give students the guide for going out there, capturing, and it's very specific to what they've already then processed and as part of the content in this introductory course. So now they're asked to take 10 photographs to capture ways that you see learning in relation to motivation, human learning theories. How do you perceive school system, standards-based curriculum, and reform efforts? So now it relates directly to some of what they've been introduced to, but some of what they've already known, but now kind of reformulated some ideas about. And that's the goal here. So capture that in photographs. Again, we limit how many they're going to be able to select. They have the captions for them and they present these. And so this is another time in the semester that they get to present and then reflect on how the audience received it, and the audience being their peers and the instructor. And then the final phase comes at the end of the semester. Again, after they've processed more content, we allow them to then have some very specific questions. By this time, we've talked quite a bit about the law. We talked about ethical dilemmas that teachers may experience. We talked about the characteristics of teachers that make for effective teachers. And so again, we prompt them with very specific questions in ways they can capture what their understanding or reforming understandings about at this point. And so this would then be the final project that has to do with the teaching philosophy. So what the students are doing is basically taking a journey throughout the semester. They're using the content that we're teaching them, hopefully in both courses, as from the lens of a student and the teacher. They're learning along the way and reflecting, presenting and reflecting on where they are in the trajectory. And the whole idea is that by the end of this project, they're able to capture their initial ideas on who they're going to become as a teacher. Not the final product, but the beginning journey of a professional teaching philosophy. All right, so that concludes the details for our Photovoice project. And I think we just have enough time. We do have enough time for questions or answers.
There are a couple questions in the chat. One is about a specific resource that the students could search or read before about Photovoice. And the second one is, what is a feedback sleep?
Yeah,
And if you can show a couple examples. I don't think that we can go over the three, right? But those are there.
So I can talk a little bit about them. So the feedback slip is like an exit ticket. I'm not sure you're familiar with what an exit ticket is, but after the presentation, we would be able to we would have the peers give some feedback to the presenter themselves about the themes they presented, about their experiences. These are pretty much just to provide maybe further prompting on some of the things that they talked about. so that, again, as part of this process of forming their teaching philosophy, they can go back and think about it before they produce their initial teaching philosophy draft, for example. So feedback slip is just really some reflection questions that we give the audience members to be able to offer to the presenter. And then we can give those to the presenter as they continue thinking about their drafting their philosophy. I hope that makes sense. The other question was about, what was the other question?
Resources for the students to read before.
You know, I find this book very, very reader friendly. I could put it in the chat as a title. And again, this is Amanda Latt's Photovoice Research in Education and Beyond. Although it is talking more specific about the methodology, because it is mentioned that it's a flexible project that could be used in multiple ways, but it does give you the basics. It's really easy to read, and it gives you the basics on the steps. And I know that there were some questions about the methodology itself, and that's an excellent methodology, by the way, but we didn't use it in that way for the project per se, but it could very well be something that is introduced as research methodology for students. So I can include the reference in the chat and also share that with Dr. Cavazos when she shares everything out.
The last one is if we have right now available examples from students.
I have one, which is the one I shared with the group. I don't have it available to show here for the presentation. She's one of our former Step Up students. And so every time I use it, I have used it in the past, I need to make sure that she's okay with my showing it because it has her name on it. So, and I apologize, but I don't have it approval to show it here, but I'd be more than happy to share some examples, maybe not necessarily that clip, but some other ones, and I can send it to Dr. Cavazos, if that's okay.
And there's a last question. Gabi Bridges says, if as teacher educators, have you all made your own personal Photovoice project to analyze your own perspectives? I have said, yes, Gabi, we have been doing that. And it's very helpful and very insightful. And it's more than, in my case, I don't know if you will agree with this. In my case, is you learn from making it, but you learn even more from the peer feedback. I think that is is key.
I want to mention that we used this a couple of years ago with a nonprofit community organization of Lupe. We had Lupe, we actually had another Rise, and we engaged in this Photovoice project. They asked us to produce our own. They wanted us to share like ours first. And I'll be very honest with you, it has to be, it's not easy. And I have not found myself in that place where I can share mine. So that's my personal experience, but that would have been the group that I would have shared it with, not you all. So I haven't done so.
What about you, Karen? You not only did the Photovoice, but you also published a piece with all our. So.
And you're right that it's very personal, and it really I think you can see through the way that this is structured that you start with what's most familiar and comfortable, for the students, which is their experience being a student and a learner. And then it slowly transitions, and then they, get out of their comfort zone and start thinking more critically and broadly. And it's a learning experience. It's a development and growth experience. And that deep reflection, often I hear people say, well, you ask your students to reflect on something, and they don't really know how to do that. But through this process, there's some real deep critical reflection And then they get to see others doing the same, so they don't feel alone in that. But it is, you know, it's a vulnerable space, but it's worth going through the process. And for me, if somebody is going to become an educator, that's a really important process to go through. And then hopefully we hook them and they continue with us, because we have ideas for how to keep them engaged until they apply for the teacher preparation program to start their junior year. So to stay with them, and then they have their peer learning community as they're going through their college experience and applying and moving into teacher, you know, candidacy. They have, you know, they have some friendly peers that they've been working through and they know really well. And we think that that will be very supportive to them as they go through the rest of the program and then become teachers and continue to support each other.
So Alcione is impressed, and this is great work. It's great to see what my colleagues have been up to. So thank you so much, Alcione.
Yes, Alcione's done a lot of work with teacher agency, and so we're following suit, Alcione. We're trying to do that.
And it's 12:48. Maybe couple more minutes for one question.
May I make some comment, please?
Jorge, we see your hand.
Hi, everybody. So I didn't know what Photovoice was. So when I saw this announcement for this session, I looked it up and I read it was you know, expressing ideas through a picture, but having, you know, a little explanation of I guess of feelings that the picture helped express. And so I don't know if you would consider what I do right now in one of my classes as a Photovoice assignment. So I have the students take an image of something they do in a lab, and then they write a reflection on why they chose to post about that activity, what they found challenging about it, and it's shared with the students in the class. So that this is not a project, but would you consider this a Photovoice assignment?
I would definitely. It has two of the main characteristics that you talked about. They have to be able to justify and explain, right, why I chose this very specific photograph. And so again, you're giving the participant another way to express how they feel about something. It's not just write a reflection or an essay, but it is show us the photograph and then why did you choose that? So I would say it's a variation for sure.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
And Ludmila, we see your hand.
Oh, thank you. I have a question because I do something similar, not precisely like Photovoice, but I'm asking my students to get some sketch. What do you feel now when you are playing something? Because I'm teaching class piano, and it is very important for them not just to think about what note do you play, what rhythm do you play, and how do you feel, how does it sound to be expressive. So my question is, so to develop like a photo voice project, do you think I will need to ask them to find the photo which is explains how do they feel, some particular assignments playing this, because we're playing like different expression, play the same song with different expression. So my question is, so photo, it could be the same related with music, like photo voice of the student. How do I feel in the moment, in the spot?
Absolutely. I think that would be a great assignment and variation. Like I mentioned, Photovoice is very flexible. There are specific steps, obviously, and it is a methodology. If you use it for research, there are specific things to consider. But the variations that you're talking about, the eliciting of the emotion based on a photograph or visual, that's the key, I think, because our students sometimes can express themselves a lot better in that way. And so just the fact that we're using it and it's of high interest, you know, to them. But I think that's very creative what you described.
Oh, thank you. Because I just like my students to be as active learner, and many times they just repeat what you are doing. And I'd like them to raise their idea, to bring their idea. How do they feel? Why do they do it? This is, I was trying, because before I did something with a performance project when they did play, and then they describe what is the idea, how do they develop this idea. But finally, I found like in the learning process, it's nice to bring them some spot creative work, because when they are doing something, they more repeat than they create. So thank you for your great project. I think it is will work for many activities because it's important for students to, for me as instructor, to see how do they feel now, what when they are learning something. Thank you. I really appreciate. Thank you. Great job.
And Alcione?
Yes, I just wanted to share an idea with Ludmila. Since you're teaching piano, your photo voice might actually be a sound voice. So you might ask students to play a note in a certain way, or a little musical phrase to show how they felt, you know, and there might make a nice connection to the music. I don't know. I just thought it might be a creative way of doing it.
Oh, thank you very much. I am really doing like this to play and to draw or to give some photo, because students don't pay attention about this, because too much technique questions, how to do, what to do, where to find, you know, and I'd like them to focus like it is just a tool, and it is for final goal to create music, to make music. Thank you. I really appreciate your idea. It is great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, I
Yes,
think
that gives me an idea of when the students record their presentation. So you have overlapping of the visual, the photo, and their caption and their explanation behind it. But you could actually have music playing in the background that also represents the thoughts and feelings and experiences in the photo. I mean, some of our students are super tech savvy and creative, so I know they could do it. I don't know if I could get that fancy, but it gives me an idea of how you could actually layer on even more.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'm very much inspired by this work, and I'd love to do one of my own. I teach a class, and I'm having our students work on a teaching philosophy statement. And last year, I shared a reflection of my teaching philosophy because I was trying out a podcast, using iMovie, or I can't remember, GarageBand I was using. And it was very interesting because I was reflecting on my choices and why I made those choices. And now looking back at it, just having the voice, how having images could, probably enhance and complement that reflection and that revision process that I was thinking, you know, through the audio. So I very much appreciate this work. And yes, if you all could share with us, you know, a link to some samples and we can share it back with the list, I think that would be wonderful. And if you have your slides that you can share with us in a PDF version, we can share it with the group as well. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to our facilitators, Dr. Lewis, Dr. Espinosa Dulanto, and Dr. Garcia, and Dr. Lerma, of course, that I know she's part of the project. Thank you. You all take care. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.